right, welcome everybody to today's live webinar, Limiting Network Exposure for Secure Remote and Mobile Access. So on today's agenda, we'll be introducing Array Networks, our company and our product, giving you an overview of that. Many of you have been on webinars previously, familiar with Array Networks. For some of you, may be new to Array Networks, so I want to provide just a quick background on who we are and what we do before we get into the meat of the webinar. And the topic of today, limiting network exposure. So I want to do a review and touch on the top 3 or 4 things that you may or may not be aware of that really create the majority of the network exposure when deploying remote and mobile access. And once we've introduced those, then spending a good chunk of time talking about how to mitigate that. What are some of the solutions and what are some of the approaches that can help to limit and to mitigate network exposure. In addition, I'd like to take a little bit of time as well. In addition to the challenges of network exposure, there are some things that are creating some new challenges with respect to remote and mobile access, and a lot of that's around mobility, and how to provide mobile access to applications and what are some of your options there, in addition to some trends in virtualization and how that impacts secure remote and mobile access as well. And so I want to touch on some of those challenges and also present some best practices for enabling mobility and virtualization, and then save some time toward the end for some Q&A. So with that, before we get started, just some quick housekeeping. On today's call, so I'm Paul Anderson, Senior Director of Marketing here for Array Networks. Also on the call with me today is Abhishek Gupta, who is a Senior Sales Engineer for Array Networks as well. Have Abhi here, generally toward the end when we do the Q&A, we do get some technical questions, and great to have Abhi here to be able to answer those on the call today. If there's anything that for whatever reason we don't get to a question or we can't answer a question, we'll definitely follow up with answers to all the questions from today's webinar. Speaking of questions, in your WebEx portal you should see both a Q&A window and a chat window. So as we go along, feel free to enter any questions or comments you might have into the Q&A or chat window. We'll be sure to answer those questions at the end. Also at the end, as we're answering questions, feel free to just take that time to think of any questions you might have, and you can be entering questions while we're answering some of the questions that we already got. So with that, let's get started. So just a quick overview of Array Networks. Array's been around for a fair bit of time now, probably just about or just over 15 years. We're founded in 2000. Headquartered here in Milpitas, California, in the Bay Area, Silicon Valley, and have about 400 or just over 400 employees. It's a global presence, so we have 400 employees, but those are spread across, obviously, North America and Europe, but we also have a very strong presence in China, as well as in Japan, as well as in India, as well as in some other emerging markets. So fairly good-sized organization with a global presence. We were founded in 2000, and we were one of the innovators or the pioneers of what's now called the application delivery controller. So way back when, load balancing was kind of the technology that everybody was offering, and Array was the first to develop what we call the integrated traffic management appliance. That's now known as an application delivery controller today, but it's a load balancer that we've integrated SSL offloading, we've integrated caching, compression, traffic shaping, we've layer 7 scripting, security, firewalling, all these types of networking functions, networking and security functions that used to be point products are now rolled into one very powerful product called an application delivery controller. And that's the primary product that Array pioneered and that we've been doing for close to 15 years now. Over the course of that time, we've introduced other product lines. We have SSL VPN. That's the product line that we're going to be focusing on today. We've been doing that, 10 years, 11 years, something in that range, maybe even a little bit more. So both those two products, we have lots of experience, and they're very robust, very mature, very proven products. Also, we've introduced WAN optimization controller product, so to double down on the application and the server efficiency improvements we can enable with our ADC, we can further improve application performance across networks. Web application firewall security is something to where the customers are looking toward application delivery vendors more and more for increasing levels of security, and we've introduced the web application firewall. In addition to we call a virtualized appliance. So many people want to be able to run virtual appliances to take advantage of some of the things that's going on with cloud and virtualization, but they'd also like to keep some of the performance reliability that they come to expect from dedicated appliances. So we have a virtualized appliance, hardware appliance, and on that appliance you can run virtual editions of any of those other products that you've seen that I just discussed there. Can run on that virtualized appliance, get the best of both worlds, the agility of cloud and virtualization with the performance of a dedicated appliance. So obviously, in terms of our market, we're an app delivery vendor. Segments, we've been serving the enterprise since the beginning. Some strength in things like financial services, healthcare, so on and so forth. In addition to public sector, where we're very strong as well. State, local government, federal, education, and more recently, service provider, or specifically cloud service provider, where infrastructure as a service, where customers are looking to buy networking functions like load balancing and SSL VPN, but looking to buy them as an infrastructure as a service from a cloud provider. Array now sells to the infrastructure as a service providers, who then turn those into services that they sell to customers. So cloud service providers, SaaS providers, is just another strong and growing market for Array. And as shown here, by over the course of 15 years, acquiring over 5,000 worldwide customers, primarily enterprise customers, a few of which you can see here. So that's a little bit about Array Networks, just some background on who we are and what we do. And here you can see, I mentioned this already in the introduction, but just wanted to give a very quick overview of the product portfolio. So I'm going to hit the button here, and then hopefully this will fade out a few of these so that we can kind of zone in on the product and the solution and the area we're going to be talking about today with respect to secure mobile access and limiting network exposure. But the thing I'd like to call out on this slide, and I did touch on it on the previous slide as well, is that you see the physical appliances here, whether it's the ADCs, the SSL VPN, the WAN optimization, or the WAF. We have the physical appliances, but you see the little icon sitting on top of every appliance. We have virtual editions of all these products. So if you're the type of customer, or if you're a partner that has customers that's going down that road of virtualization, it's maybe getting away a little bit from the dedicated appliances. Any of the functionality that Array sells, you can get as a virtual appliance for any hypervisor, KVM, VMware, Hyper-V, Zen, you name it. We support, I believe, all of them. But for today, the solution that we're going to be talking about today, some of the concepts and some of the approaches we're going to be talking about today are in the area of the SSL VPN. So, network exposure, it's a growing concern. Why? Probably the most common form of VPN, whether that be an IPsec VPN or an SSL VPN, is people go with the layer 3 connectivity or the network level connectivity. Perhaps it's the simplest, perhaps it's what's been around longest, perhaps it's what's the most commonly used for VPN. So what's true about it? Okay, it's great. It's a VPN, and what does that mean? It means that the tunnel itself is encrypted. Whether you use the IPsec to provide that encrypted tunnel, or you use SSL to provide that encrypted tunnel, the only thing you're really encrypting here or protecting or guarding is the data in transit. You've got a secure tunnel for data to go both directions. So it's okay. That's a level of security, but it's not enough in today's world. That there in and of itself is network exposure. Why? Because you've got an endpoint out there that can launch anything that it wants through that encrypted tunnel. So you've basically just created an opening for an attack to potentially be launched going toward the corporate network. The other thing is you've created a network level connection where all these endpoints are on your network, and there's nothing that stops the the sensitive data or the proprietary data from your organization from going the other direction out that encrypted pipe. So yes, the pipe is secure. However, it doesn't do anything to prevent an attack or to prevent data leakage. So right off the bat there, using that layer 3 VPN, it's a good thing, but you have to be aware that it is creating network exposure. And that leads me, as I look to the upper right hand, really what it's doing is it's creating what we kind of call a Swiss cheese firewall, right? What's happening there on the firewall is that we're opening different ports for different things. Number one, whether it's an SSL VPN, it's using a particular port, or an IPsec is using a particular port, or you're opening up things for VDI, or you're opening up different ports for different applications. You've got a lot of different ports that have been opened up because we need to connect remotely to these applications and services. The other thing I touched on just earlier was every time if you have many remote users or remote and mobile users, and you're providing network level connectivity to all of them, then you're basically taking IP addresses for all of those remote users, adding them to your network, and now those are all holes through your firewall and into your network as well. So you set up a firewall to protect your network, but using that network level connectivity and supporting multiple applications, you're really just opening it right back up and creating a lot of network exposure. The other thing to look at is attack vectors. So, maybe to some degree it was okay to use network level connectivity in the early days of VPN. Perhaps you had a few users that were coming in, and it was something to where you could keep an eye out on, or the risk was acceptable. Today, what we're seeing is that more and more workers are having multiple devices. So not only that, almost everyone in the organization has become a remote or mobile worker. So you have a lot more users, and then you have a lot more users that have a lot more devices. For instance, myself, I have the laptop, the PC, I have the tablet, I have the mobile device. I want to use all of those. So you've got, many more people working remote and mobile with many more devices. You add that to the Swiss cheese firewall. You add that to using layer 3 connectivity or network level connectivity. What you're doing is you're introducing a ton of network exposure, a lot of attack vectors that you have to monitor. Pretty soon, you can't monitor them all, and you're going to have an issue. The final issue I want to touch on is BYOD. So more and more people are wanting to use their own device and conduct business or use it for business, particularly when we talk about mobility and mobile devices. So when you do have a network level connection, perhaps there was some comfort in the fact that that was a managed PC that you were allowing to have network level connectivity. Okay, well, now you move into mobility. Yeah, maybe you are issuing managed mobile devices, but maybe you're not. So that inability to have any control over that endpoint, to deploy any kind of MDM or any kind of endpoint security with a personal device, you're out of that business. You can't do it. So you add these things, they kind of stack up. And in the end, there's a number of challenges and also a lot of network exposure. So eventually, this can come back, and it's just too many things to watch, too many things to look at, too many opportunities, something's going to go wrong. So when we talk to the customers, we say, it's impossible to eliminate network exposure, but what we can do is limit it. And how do we limit it? What do we have to do? And that's the discussion that we're having with people, with customers, and the discussion we're having on this webinar. So really there's two areas, probably more, but there's two areas where we focus when we talk to anybody really, but customers, potential customers, and so on, about how do we recommend limiting network exposure, or what are the best practices. Number one is selecting the right tool. So you have to have the right elements to work with. In this case, we have an SSL VPN product, but really the SSL VPN is the right tool for the job. It's going to give you the different features, security features, access methods, flexibility that you're going to need in order to begin to limit network exposure. So the number one thing is picking the right tool or picking the right secure access gateway. In this case, the enterprise class SSL VPN. Why? Because it minimizes the number of those open ports that we talked about. And it really has the maximum in terms of flexibility and security to be able to, number one, it's always a trade-off, right, between productivity and security. And with the SSL VPN, you have that flexibility so that you can enable productivity, give people access to applications, but you can do that while limiting network exposure. The second important thing is if you have the right tool, then we focus on using that tool correctly. And the reason I say that is we looked at and done some surveys, of how people were using the SSL VPN, customers of ours where we sold them that SSL VPN. And it doesn't do much good if you have this very powerful tool that's got a lot of flexibility, a lot of different access methods, a lot of different security mechanisms. But in the end, you go ahead and deploy it as if it was a traditional IPsec VPN where you just gave everybody network-level access and didn't enable some of those more advanced AAA or endpoint security. You just used this very powerful tool in a similar manner to a traditional IPsec VPN. You didn't really use the tool properly to help limit network exposure. So these are the two things, is selecting the right tool and then using that tool correctly. So we're going to go through that. The enterprise class SSL VPN, the reason I say this is they're not all created equal. Some are definitely better than others, and so you want to, if you say, hey, I need an SSL VPN, you want to make sure that you select the one that's going to give you what you need in order to, number one, accommodate remote mobile access, accommodate an entire workforce, but also give you the flexibility and security to limit that network exposure. So centralized and scalable, this is something we like to focus on. We're talking about SSL, so it's a single open port 443, but it helps you, having that scalable platform helps you to consolidate secure access. So what you want is fewer attack vectors to monitor, so a single point of entry, and it's got to be powerful enough to enable that. The other thing about that is if you have a single unified centralized SSL VPN platform, now you're setting policies in one place. That gives you consistency. So sometimes what we see is things become a little bit fragmented and you have multiple secure access platforms. This creates the opportunity for inconsistency in policies. What you want to do is have the policies consistent across everyone and hold everybody to the same standard. Flexible access methods, this is huge. You're going to see this is going to play a big role in limiting network exposure. You want to be able to have much more than just that network level connectivity. You want to be able to do web proxying, RDP, VDI, these multiple layer 3, layer 4, layer 7 access methods. Using those intelligently is going to play a very key role in limiting that exposure. End-to-end security, so I did talk about this, about how just that SSL or IPsec encrypted tunnel is security for data in transit. What you want is an SSL VPN that's got end-to-end security. So on the client, you're looking for powerful tools there, endpoint security, adaptive policies. Of course, the transport, one of the things that we like to highlight for the Array solution is, we use SSL for that, for security for data in transit. SSL is something that's been related or associated with things like Heartbleed and shell shock, bash, some other vulnerabilities in the last 12 to 18 months. Array actually makes our own SSL stack, and because we do that, we get a lot better performance, but we're also able to make it a lot more secure, and we weren't vulnerable to any of those vulnerabilities that we saw over the last 12 to 18 months, so none of our customers had to go back and do patching or worry about security or anything like that. But in addition, server-side security as well. So you've protected the endpoint, you've protected the data in transit, and then what can you do on the server side to protect the servers, the applications, the data, and so on. So you want that end-to-end security. Definitely want to be able to support, you don't want to be doing two solutions, one for traditional remote access or PC access and another one for mobile access. So having a platform that has the integrations with all the common mobile OS VPN integrations so that you can plug right into those mobile platforms, the ability to securely enable BYOD, and that capacity, again, going back to scalable, to support multiple devices per user. So, if you have a a large or growing organization with multiple people using multiple devices, that adds up, and you want to have a secure mobile access platform that can accommodate all those users, in addition to things like burst users for business continuity event, without impacting the user experience. So no matter how many people log on, no matter how many devices are configured, you're going to get that premium end user experience. And finally, custom virtual portals. Something that's very important. You're going to have, as you do this consolidation and centralization, you're going to have different groups of people with different needs, whether that be different business units, contractors, partners, customers, all wanting or needing access to different applications, and you don't want to expose everything to everybody. So you want to be able to make custom SSL VPN virtual portals that are fully partitioned, and then those they can have a look and feel that's unique and tailored to the needs of that particular community of interest, but you can assign particular applications and resources to that, further limiting exposure and giving them only what they need. So you're going to want to look and find something that's giving you all these tools that are going to then give you the ability to implement them in a way that can limit that network exposure. I'm going to give you just a quick overview to begin to give you a sense for the Array product, SSL VPN in general, but this is some of the capabilities that you're going to want to have in terms of access methods in order to limit that network exposure. So you can see here, whether you want to do network level connectivity, we have that. So you're going to need that for things like native mobile apps, right? So now I can provide secure mobile access to native mobile applications over a layer 3 connection, but I can do it on an application-specific basis. You're going to want the ability to do layer 7 proxy or to provide web-based access to applications. Again, on the back end, you're going to have things like virtual desktops, virtualized applications. You're going to want to give application-specific access to those back-end resources. RDP, even though there's a lot of virtual desktop and virtual applications going on out there, still there are a number of traditional desktops, workstations, and so on that people need remote mobile access to. You want to be able to do that on a per desktop basis. And then for network level connectivity for PC to PC, whether that be to access a network, file shares, or client server applications, you want that as well. So really the point of this slide here is just to show how much flexibility in terms of access methods you get with something like an SSL VPN versus traditional, let's say, IPsec VPN connectivity. And just to touch on this and give a little bit more detail, I'm not going to touch on every single feature we have here, but with respect to the enterprise class SSL VPN, you want to make sure this is something to where you're providing this presentation to everybody after the webinar. But going back to needing that end-to-end security, what to look for in terms of the client, in terms of the transport, and in terms of the server-side capability. And with our SSL VPN, you can see on the endpoint, you're going to get those things like those pre-authentication, host checking, adaptive policy, something I touch on for people because hey, let's say I go out and I do pre-authentication or I do some sort of a host check and I find out that, yeah, it's a device I know, but it's coming from an area that's unknown. Okay, I'm going to do something different, give you access to different things. So very powerful there in terms of limiting what's exposed based on what we find out about the security posture at that endpoint. The SSL encryption, the security for the data in transit. Talked a little bit about this, talked a little bit about Array's advantage there with our SSL implementation that's Heartbleed-proof and not vulnerable to some of those open SSL-related vulnerabilities that have popped up in the recent past. And then on the server side, really getting very robust on the authentication, authorization, and auditing. Giving a few examples here of some of the, for instance, the multi-factor and the dual-factor authentication that we support. And then also providing a web firewall in addition to that full reverse proxy. So any connection that comes into the Array, it never connects directly to a network. It never connects directly to an application. Gets terminated, gets proxied, and by doing that, we're able to use the web firewall take a look at those connections, and if something doesn't look right, it doesn't get to connect to the network, doesn't get to connect to the application. So this is all part of that, taking the right tool for the job, touching on, with some emphasis here on that range of access methods that you're going to need, and also that end-to-end security that you're going to need. And this is really, I think, the meat of the webinar and the presentation, and also the meat of the approach that we take when we work with customers. So you can see the graphic here with the two axes, and the vertical axis there being security, and the horizontal axis there being the strategic direction. So what we're seeing is, when you use something like RDP, whether that's whether that's providing remote desktop to a physical desktop, or whether that's providing access to things like virtualized desktops or virtualized applications, the benefit here is that there really is no data exposure. What you're doing is you're just giving the ability to remotely control and remotely access and remotely utilize those applications and desktops. So it really doesn't matter whether somebody's on a corporate managed device or they're on a personal device. What does it matter? Data can't leave the network. It can't get onto those devices, so it really doesn't matter, what the condition of those devices or who owns those devices, where those devices are, irrelevant, because the devices are simply a terminal. It doesn't matter if it's a mobile device, a PC, or what manufacturer, brand, OS. It's simply a terminal into using those applications and desktops. And completely eliminating the ability for data leakage. So you're fully enabling productivity there while almost entirely eliminating the potential for attack. There is no network level connection, so you can't launch an attack, and also data can't go the other direction. So here you've enabled secure mobile access, but you haven't exposed your network or your data at all. So we try to say, okay, well, look at your users. What users can be moved into this bucket or can be serviced by this approach? And take that inventory, and what we'd like to do then is say, okay, how many can you move that direction? Because the more users you can move that direction, the more secure you're going to be. Okay, you've done that. Now we go, okay, well, what's the next thing? Web apps. Proxied applications. Again, it's a layer 7 connection. You haven't put another IP address on your network. You haven't made another network level connection from remote mobile into your network. What you've done is simply said, hey, this person has logged in and now can access a web application, a proxied web application. They can interact with it, they can be productive with it, but they can't launch an attack, and to some degree, you're protecting the data. You can put limits on of what kind of data can be downloaded to the mobile device. Now that comes down to policies. Just because it's a web-based application doesn't mean that there aren't instances when data could be downloaded. So you have to be careful there. However, it does provide, in terms of network exposure, it provides much less exposure than using that full layer 3 connection. So what we do is we say, okay, how many users or how many applications can we deliver to your end users doing this method? And so we try to see, okay, how far can we go in terms of using VDI, RDP, web apps, proxied apps to serve a good cross-section of your users or your needs? And once we've done that, then look, the reality is that you're always going to need that layer 3 VPN connection. Whether that's because you've got executives that aren't going to settle for anything less, or whether you've got client-server applications, homegrown client-server applications, or different things to where it's not feasible or it's not realistic to try to service them using web-based apps or redevelop them or something like this. And you simply need this. However, you've gone as far out as possible in terms of, where possible, using alternative access methods that can dramatically reduce and limit your network exposure. But you're always going to have perhaps some subset of users that are going to be using that layer 3 SSL VPN or layer 3 VPN. So, okay, that's okay. Now we look at, if you have to do that, then now you have to begin to take advantage of those extra security features that come with an SSL VPN. So that goes back to having the right tool, but then knowing how to use the right tool. So for those that have to have the layer 3 SSL VPN, we want to layer on the security that the SSL VPN brings to the table. And so how do we then go about locking down that network level connectivity? So for users that require network level connectivity, we use the SSL VPN security features to mitigate risks. So one thing could be limit access. If you're going to be handing out layer 3 connectivity, maybe it's only managed devices. Maybe that's the only people that you allow that for. Why? Because then that gives you the ability to install things on that device to further lock down security. Turn on the host checks. Ensure that that device is authorized. Ensure that it's healthy. Ensure that it's being fired up from a trusted location, and apply those adaptive policies. So, for instance, if it is an authorized device, hey, it's a healthy device, but it's being used from some place that's never been used from before. Well, maybe we don't display a couple of the more sensitive resources, and you can do that with the SSL VPN. Implementing the dual or multi-factor authentication. So you saw the wide variety of technologies and partners that we integrate with for dual and multi-factor authentication. Make that mandatory if you're using the layer 3 connectivity. Using the AAA to specify exactly which networks or resources are authorized and displayed for each user. So that ability is built in. Take advantage of it. And then on the back end, using the logging. So, set that logging and create alerts for, suspicious activity, things that seem out of the norm. So you're enabling that layer 3 connectivity for certain users, but set those alerts, be alerted to things that are out of the ordinary so that you can go quickly take a look at them before a problem gets out of hand. So that summarizes the bulk of the presentation on what's driving or what's creating some of that network exposure, and also some of the best practices for limiting that network exposure. But one of the things I want to also touch on, because we say remote and mobile access, and mobile access is actually an area where there is some challenge, because yeah, you can connect mobile devices, but that doesn't in and of itself give productivity. What gives productivity is applications. And the challenge becomes then, how do we mobilize our applications? So looking at some of these questions, how many native apps do we develop in-house and how many do we purchase? How do we deliver virtualized apps and desktops to mobile devices? How do we deliver applications that happen to be on physical desktops to mobile devices? And what balance do we strike between these approaches? So these are some of the conversations that we're seeing with prospects, with customers as we talk to them. So the good news is with SSL VPN, or with SSL VPN like Array's SSL VPN, we actually give you a range of options that allow you to mobilize applications. And by giving you all these different options, then you as an IT department can decide which approaches you want to take or how to strike that right balance. So IT can decide how much to invest and how each application will be mobilized, as well as how much exposure is acceptable. So here I give a range of different ways by which applications are extended to mobile devices. There's obviously the native app, there's web apps, virtual desktops and applications, physical desktops and applications. And I think looking at this chart, you're going to begin to see how that maps to that exposure diagram that I drew earlier. So, for a native app, you're going to get that ideal user experience, but you're going to need a layer 3 connection oftentimes in order for that thing to function properly. So the security becomes something of a concern. You need to figure out how you're going to lock it down. And the cost becomes a concern for native app, because you're either going to redevelop or purchase an application. You're moving on to the web apps. If you remember that chart, the web app is going to give you actually a pretty good, hopefully if it's been developed right, a good user experience. And the security is going to be pretty good as well. And then it's kind of the tweener here, where the development costs and some costs are going to be, there's going to be some costs associated with it as well. And then you can see as you move over to virtual desktops and applications, physical desktops and applications, they weren't really developed for a mobile environment, so you may not get the best user experience, but if you remember back to the chart, you're going to get the best in terms of no data leakage, no network connection. Now, in the case of VDI, you're going to pick up some expense by running those applications in the virtual environment. If you're connecting back to physical desktops or traditional desktops, there's no expense there because it's existing infrastructure, existing security strategy. So all of these have pros and cons. And you know, the good news is, again, the Array SSL VPN gives you the ability to support the mobilization of applications using any of these methods, and it allows you to pick and choose where you're going to invest and how to manage the security while delivering applications to mobile devices. Another one I just wanted to touch on briefly is the challenges of adopting virtualization. So one of the things that we're seeing here is that people are providing mobile access to things like, in addition to the physical desktops, they're providing access to VMware desktops or Microsoft Terminal Services or Citrix virtualized applications. And some of the challenges that arise is, again, we go back to that multiple attack vectors. You've got people coming in through a Citrix gateway. You've got people coming in through a Microsoft gateway or a VMware gateway, multiple attack vectors, multiple things to watch. That creates a challenge. Also, challenges around complex management, inconsistent policies. Again, if you're setting policies for users on different platforms, you're going to get to a place where you're holding people to different standards and policies are inconsistent between platforms. And that's from a management standpoint. From an end user standpoint, we're finding that users are getting frustrated because they have, to access resource A, they go to gateway A and they have a process A and a look and feel A. If they want to use a different resource, they have to go to a different gateway, different process, different client, different this, different that. It gets very confusing for the end customers. You get a lot of help desk calls, you get a lot of rising costs. So as people begin to introduce these different virtual resources and then try to deliver them to mobile applications, you get a lot of challenges that come out of that. And one of the good things about the SSL VPN is it has an ability to address that or alleviate some of those challenges. So what you can do is, because the Array SSL VPN can deliver, provide access to any kind of VMware, Citrix, Microsoft, virtualized, physical, any kind of application, what you can have is you can have a unified gateway and you can have a unified client. So the unified gateway, again, you minimize that attack vector. You've got one gateway to watch. So you minimize attack vectors, simplify management, but at the same time, you're having consistent policies for all users. From the end user perspective, the unified client, so there's one client, whether that's on a PC or on a mobile device, you fire up one client, you log into that, and from there you have a streamlined user experience where you can access any resource, whether it be the Citrix, VMware, Microsoft, web app, client-server app, doesn't matter. They're all just listed there as icons, and you simply tap the one you want and you get access to it. So streamline the user experience and minimize those help desk calls and reduce costs. So just touching base there, in addition to limiting network exposure, the SSL VPN and the Array SSL VPN in particular really helps in terms of mobilizing applications, but also addressing some of the challenges that come up providing secure mobile access to today's virtualized resources. And this here, just a quick look at the single pane of glass from the end user perspective in terms of logging in, having all your resources presented to you, regardless of what kind of resource they are, and being able to either tap or click on any one of them and gain seamless access to the applications you need to do your job. And coming to a close here, just to give a few examples, I said earlier we've had over 5,000 enterprise customers, and just wanted to throw a couple of them up here. Oracle, in terms of technology, been using it for quite a while. We talked about communities of interest, and that's one of the things they do here is that they have a lot of different consultants that they send to a lot of different businesses, and they need a platform that allows them to seamlessly have access back to the Oracle network from any other corporate network. And our ability to do that, nobody else was able to do that. In terms of Humana, Humana was one of the originals that helped us to develop the concept of centralizing scalable secure remote access and really limiting the number of attack vectors. And they helped us to develop this model, and we've deployed successfully at Humana for, I think, close to 10 years. And SoftLayer, I talked a little bit earlier about the new breed of cloud customer or cloud service provider, infrastructure as a service provider customer that Array is now being deployed successfully at. And for SoftLayer, which is the IBM cloud, infrastructure as a service cloud, they have data centers around the world, and they need to have secure access for not only their administrators to maintain and to configure the underlying infrastructure, but also for every customer to log in using their own virtual SSL VPN portal to manage and configure the infrastructure services that they've purchased from SoftLayer. So just another example of the flexibility of the platform. And again, just a quick sampling of the many customers that we've been able to assist. And so with that, good, we've left some time. I'll go to the Q&A. Give me a quick moment here to bring up the window and see what kind of questions we might have. All right, so first question here. How does your product compare to the Juniper SSL VPN? So before I turn it over to Avi to talk a little bit about that, it's a great question. I was going to talk about that a little bit. If you do have a Juniper SSL VPN, one thing I'd encourage you to do is to go to our website, because we have a very compelling promotion on the Juniper platform. Juniper obviously got out of the secure mobile access business at the beginning of this year, or I think even the previous year that they divested that business unit. There's now a new business called Pulse, but many customers are unsure of exactly where things are going with Juniper or where things are going with Pulse, and are taking that opportunity to reevaluate their options and pick the best solution for them going forward. And so part of that process is a very compelling campaign we have on Juniper to try to have a number of those customers take a look at Array and see perhaps Array can be a better solution for them going forward. Avi?
Thank you. Well, to answer this question, we are neck to neck in competition with Juniper SSL VPNs. Now they are more known as Pulse Secure. The benefit of using a solution is it's much easier. We have converted a lot of Juniper customers to our network in the past 6 months, and what we hear from them is they like us because it's easy to use, they know what's going on, they know how to change and add new features which is easy to be done on the Array networks than Juniper. That's one, ease of use of solution. Very important, because as Paul said, you should be able to use your tool correctly. That is what we've been focusing with our solution. If we talk about the features and functions, it's not a rocket science. It's VPN solutions with a lot of features for two-factor authentication, host security, strong web resource proxying, file sharing, connectivities or connectors to the VDIs and Microsoft infrastructures. Of course, we have some solution like which are very specific to our networks, like array registration technology or the R database, which is very important for proxy RDPs. We have our own iOS and Android apps that we already have worked with Apple and Android. In Q1 2016 seems to be very exciting. Just to give you a little roadmap, we will have Android and iOS-based two-factor authentication. We will have a secure web services for iOS and Android, because we're seeing a lot of need for them. Not over saying a lot of the things, but we have a strong roadmap that is defining our solutions against Juniper or the Pulse Secure in the market today.
All right. How hard are the policies to implement? Can I easily differentiate them among different users and devices?
That, again, is a great question. you can do it at different levels. You can have a local database, make different groups, and attach different roles to different resources. So a user one that belongs to a role one because of the qualification, maybe group mapping or different features that you use for maybe source IP or maybe something else. And those roles can be mapped to the resources. So you might have a resource one for user one, resource two for user two. It's very easy to say which user gets what user. One of the very important point is after the user login, you can monitor each user resources, because when the session policy is made, it maps what resources or role resources are available for the user. So if you don't know what actually exactly happening, you can actually monitor it. And the last thing is all VPN logs are logged and sent to syslog server, so you can send to a SIM or a solution that you have, and you can generate reports of what each user are doing. So we can help you right from the start of the configuration, after login with the session policy, and then doing an activity monitor for you.
How much does the mobile client cost? I guess this is client regardless, whether it's the PC or the mobile client, but what's the cost for that?
All our be it mobile devices or desktop apps that we have are free. What we charge is based on the number of concurrent users and the software function that you use on the access gateway solution. So mobile clients are free.
So our users aren't real tech savvy. How hard is the user interface to learn and use for non-technical people?
That's, again, a great question, because when you're rolling out a solution and you have to deal with different people of different, IT and non-IT scenario, we want to make sure our solution is click, the access gateway is connected, and the user is able to use either the stored or predefined username password, or they can automate their two-factor authentication like we do for a large software company where there's a soft token on their Windows, and we can actually, the VPN gateway client can talk to the soft token, automatically generate the two-factor authentication and put it up for the authentication. So we can actually do a lot of automations with the APIs. We have SDKs, and this has actually helped us to improve not just the help desk for the companies, but also improve the overall usage and making the end users more productive and happy with the solutions.
So I got two questions that are kind of similar, so I'll try to wrap them together. So if I'm using MDM, do I need SSL VPN too? And also, how does this solution compare to or work with MDM?
I think that's a great question. SSL VPN and MDM are kind of complementary to each other. The reason is MDM is mostly on the iOS and Android or maybe a smartphone, but the SSL VPN is a generic solution for a desktop. So if you are looking MDM function as a comparison, then you are limiting to what end devices you are looking into. If you're looking into desktops like Windows 10, Mac, Alcapion, and Linux, there's no MDM or limited MDM kind of solution. So you will need to have SSL VPN to limit what end users can access, how they can access, and what they will be able to access. With an MDM, we complement, because you have an app with an MDM profile. Somehow they are able to create profiles and work out. Now what happens is MDM needs to connect. Of course, most of the MDM will have some kind of app tunnel, as they say, or maybe a browser-based connection, or maybe an layer 3 tunnels. That's very specific to that app. So what we do is, if that is a need, we can have our iOS and Android SDK as a VPN. We have a lot of customers who actually utilize our VPN SDKs to do the VPN connections over the MDM wrapped application. That's a great way of, like you said, how do I minimize, concerns from my IT? How do I make my applications more productive faster? More the integration, easier it is for us to give you more functions and features, be it MDM, be it firewall, be it any solution that you have in your data centers.
Just to add to that as well, MDM is something to where, if you're using primarily an access method that's, let's say an RDP access method, or something that's more VDI or something like this, where perhaps there's just not a whole lot of risk of data leakage or exposure. It's simply a remote terminal that's accessing and using those applications. whether that be the PC or the remote mobile device. MDM is not a big concern there. MDM is something that does come into the picture, as I said, as you begin to authorize things like a layer 3 tunnel to support a native app, and you have a growing number of those, then yeah, you want to begin to mix in more MDM because it becomes more critical to provide security at the endpoint device. So it's a complementary technology. However, in some instances, it may not be necessary, just depending on the kind of access method you've enabled.
That's a very important point. If you look into Microsoft's way of putting up things, they bought the RDP clients for the iOS, Android, Mac. The reason they're doing it because they want to make their virtualized application more available on different devices. In those scenarios, you might do a simple host system verification of what they are, from what location, what antivirus they have, and then the RDP client takes over all the MDM functions. Not all, but maybe the data leakage prevention options, and that is a great way of solving solution by not making it overly crowded with different products and functions, but easy, because that's how we want to make our customers or the end users more productive with the solutions.
Similar to the Juniper questions, how do you differ from the SonicWall SSO VPN?
Again, this is a question. SonicWall has been more in SMBs, where customers are able to buy, or they are solutions to firewalls, and they want to stick to the same vendors, so they take up SonicWall. But look at the length of breadth of features and the function that we look into and can give you is very different from a SonicWall, which might not have a full functional VPN development team. Look at the roadmaps. I think it's more of a question of understanding is, are they really serious for their VPN solutions when they have a whole other kind of products for them? As Array Networks, we are very focused VPN and load balancing and, around applications. So we have a lot of teamwork, team here, and a lot of strong roadmap that actually defines our solution very differently from SonicWall. But if your needs are very simple, it doesn't matter whether it's SonicWall and a UTM solution. But if you have more than 100 users and looking for redefining how the users will be able to access, make them more productive, you should be looking into, as Paul said, an enterprise solution, because it has the enterprise functions and also the ease for you to make it work for you.
I was going to add to that, but I think you covered everything there.
Okay.
A couple quick ones here. So I had some general questions around the presentation and the recording. Yes, for those of you that have perhaps some team members or others that couldn't make today's webinar, but you'd like the presentation or the recording in order to share the content with them or bring them up to speed. Presentation generally goes out, by tomorrow. The recording generally follows another day or so after that. Get everything edited up nicely. So that gets forwarded to everybody, so you'll have that information. Let's see here. So I did mention that Juniper promotion that we have on the website, and it looks like somebody's gone out and taken a look at it. And really the question here is, so we see that the Juniper replacement offers 2 free appliances for the price of 3 years of support. Is this available for other VPN brands as well? Yes. So it is a Juniper replacement promotion that you're going to see on the website. However, we have had a number of other customers with some different brands, whether that's a FirePass or a Citrix or SonicWall or another. Please reach out to us, and we have been making that promotion available to customers with different brands of SSO VPNs. Let me do a final check here. So I think I've got all the questions that I can see here. So if you have any additional questions that you think of after the webinar, I'll follow up with everybody, but I've included both Avi and my email in the beginning portion of the presentation. So any questions come up, go ahead and fire those off to me. We'll be more than happy to answer them. The other thing that I would encourage, if you are on our website, we do have that ability. We have a download center where you can download a free 30-day trial of any of our products, including the SSO VPN. So if you're interested in the technology and want to get a sense for it and get your hands on it and take a look at it, I encourage you to go out there and download the free 30-day trial of our products. So with that, we'll conclude today's webinar, and thank you, everybody, for joining us.
Thank you, everyone.